Welcome to the Bar is Ankle High. My name is Katie.
I'm Garrett.
And this is another mini-sode. And this is about a study that just got published on nature.com. It was published in Nature Metabolism, which I think is a medical journal. But the name of the study is Brain Responses to Nutrients Are Severely Impaired and Not Reversed by Weight Loss in Humans with Obesity, a Randomized Crossover Study.
It's a mouthful.
It is, yeah. I would appreciate it if researchers could be more creative with their titles, but it is at the very least extremely descriptive. So this study was published 5 days before we were recording this. And it just caught my eye because, as we mentioned briefly in our first medical bias episode 29, the CDC classified obesity as a disease in 2013 and formally acknowledged that it is a brain-gut communication disorder. This study kind of like explains that connection a little bit. It's not the first one to do so, but its ultimate conclusions I thought were just super interesting. So anyway, basically this study says that there's a few different signals that get sent from the gut to your brain when you eat something. This study hypothesized that these signals might contribute to the regulation of eating behaviors via this, what they call the brain-gut axis. So the first signal that gets sent is a gastrointestinal vagal nerve afference, which is stimulated by the presence of nutrients and mediates the anorexigenic effects via the brainstem to several downstream brain regions. Anorexigenic means that it suppresses the appetite, or exogenic means it stimulates the appetite. So your gastrointestinal vagal nerve is what gives you that full feeling in your stomach when you're supposed to be done eating.
Mm-hmm.
The second signal is that nutrients in the gastrointestinal lumen induce an endocrine response that facilitates digestion, absorption, and subsequent metabolism of nutrients. You touched on this briefly in your PMDD episode when we talked about diabetes, because this is what causes insulin to be produced. It also causes something to be produced called glucagon like peptide 1s, aka GLP-1, and it suppresses the release of ghrelin, like gremlin, but that's the hormone that makes your tummy grumbly when you're hungry. So,
oh, interesting. There's like an actual hormone that triggers that.
yes.
So it's like sensing that your stomach is empty and that you're due for nutrients.
Yes.
And it's
it'll
triggering the grumblies.
Yes, it will release ghrelin to tell your brain, hey, I'm hungry and I need food.
Wild.
Yeah. So actually, when I first started seeing a dietitian, we worked a long time on getting me to recognize when my body was telling me I was hungry, because I had gone through so much restriction throughout my life that I was so used to ignoring that that hormone and that feeling. What happens is when you do that is that your body will produce more of that feeling, more of that ghrelin hormone, so that it takes more and more and more, kind of like we were talking about with weed. You need, like, it builds up your tolerance to this hormone. So then by the time, even if you haven't gone that far in between meals, it'll like instantaneously, sorry, the dog is shaking. It'll instantaneously tell your body, if I don't eat now, I'm going to die. And so it's like this extreme response, and it tells your brain you need a ton of food, which can ultimately lend itself to overeating. So the third,
and just to add to that too, is like, how many periods in our life are we A, taught to wait for that feeling and listen to that feeling, and B, given the opportunity to? Like, as a kid, it's okay, this is your scheduled lunchtime. You have this window to eat. And if you don't eat now, you can't eat again until whatever time.
Right.
Or in high school, when you have like a 10 a.m. lunch.
Yes.
Like, that doesn't lend itself to paying attention to hunger cues. You weren't allowed to eat in class.
No.
So it's just like, it's just so crazy that they'll like talk about like kids and obesity. And it's like, well, where are we educating them on nutrition, and where are we educating them on like paying attention to bodily cues? Because really it functions the same way as like, I have to go to the bathroom.
Yes.
You know, it's like the same, like your body is very clearly telling your brain something.
Okay, she went away. Yeah, exactly. And so the third signal that gets sent from the gut to the brain when you eat something is the changes in concentrations of nutrients in the portal or systemic circulation provide a direct post-ingestive signal of nutrient availability to different brain regions that regulate food intake. So basically, your gut is like, oh, cool, they ate pizza. We've got some fats, we've got some protein from the cheese, we've got carbs. What do we need that needs those things right now? And like, we'll distribute it, which is, again, it's just amazing to me, like what our bodies are capable of handling. That like also thank God, because we never would have survived this long if like I had to make those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about like, you know, times where I've gotten like really obsessive with eating, where I'm trying to make sure like everything I'm eating is like very specifically, you know, I'm hitting like every food group in like a proportional way, and like my body's already allocating where those need to go.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And allocating like what of that stuff is going to storage, because you don't, you know, like even if you eat the protein, you may not need the protein right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, so those are the three different ways that your gut will signal to your brain what is going on, what you're putting into it. And so we know that there are multiple brain regions and different parts of the gastrointestinal tract that have receptors for those hormones, either GLP-1, insulin, the ghrelin one. So we know that those all go different places, but the exact mechanism that insulin and GLP-1s mediate the suppressive appetite effects, and that ghrelin mediates the stimulating appetite effect, isn't totally understood. We still aren't super clear on why and how that works.
That tracks.
Well, and I'll cover this next week actually, so preview. But GLP-1s were which like we know under the brand name Ozempic, that's been used, and like metformin, those have been used by diabetics since like 2013 when they were approved by the FDA to manage weight and to manage insulin resistance. So they're not new medications by any means. They've just had like a serious PR bump lately.
Yeah, they prescribe that for PCOS too, the metformin.
Yes. So it's these aren't new medications, but they've had medications to help with this thing, but we still don't totally know like why they work. Similar to like why we don't totally understand why stimulants work for ADHD. Like if somebody's already hyper, why would giving them a stimulant calm them down? But here we are. So,
right.
You know, whatever.
Why does this heart medication give everybody boners? We don't know, but let's give it to people for boners.
Right. Yeah. Solving the real problems.
Yes.
And so
fuck these people that are having problems with their brain gut chemistry, and fuck these people with all these hormonal imbalances. Let's focus on boners.
That's what I do. I'm happy.
And my life is perfect. Only focusing. It's all boners all the time.
You remember that show Wienerville? Oh.
No.
It was like this weird ass puppet show, like semi puppet, like they were like marionettes, but with like human bodies or human heads, I mean. And yeah, it was fucking wild. It was on like late night Nick in the 90s. But yeah, it's like Wienerville, but Bonerville. Anyway.
Nope, I don't remember that one, Katie.
I will find it on YouTube. Don't you worry.
I swear it's real. This is not a dream that I had one time.
So the study that was just published noticed that there's a dopamine release in our good buddy, the basal ganglia. Specifically within the basal ganglia, there's a portion called the stratium. stradium that releases this dopamine and it releases dopamine in proportion to how much fat is introduced to the gastrointestinal tract, proving that post-ingestion nutrient signals sent to the brain regulates feeding behavior, and impaired dopamine signaling after prolonged exposure to high-calorie nutrients may lead to future overeating and obesity. So obviously this study didn't discuss ADHD, but I'll mention later, like kind of
but it
tying
like kind
in.
of does.
Right, exactly. So this study, they had split participants. Well, first of all, they had what they called lean participants and participants with obesity. And they gave them all the same like medications, treatments, whatever. So they did intragastric infusions. So I'm confident that it was like through a feeding tube. So they just put them directly into the stomach, but intragastric infusions of tap water, glucose, and lipids, and then measured the resulting neuron activity via MRIs to see how much dopamine was released after each of these infusions. Obese participants were studied before and after a dietary intervention that was aimed at reducing their body weight by 10%. So the diet period went on for 12 weeks. And a decent portion of the participants lost weight during the study. So I think it was all but 3, but I can't remember. Lost weight during this dieting period. So in doing the study, they found that lean individuals, the brain regions involved in regulating eating behavior responded differently based on whether you ate glucose or lipid-heavy foods. However, the physiological response was absent in participants with obesity, and the response is not restored to after diet-induced weight loss, meaning that once you lose weight, you don't regain that dopamine production that the lean people already had to start with.
Right. So it's like you're biologically different.
Yes. So
which makes sense why it's so hard to maintain.
Yep.
And not so anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This led the researchers to conclude that this could be the reason that so many people lose weight only to gain it all back and then some, or like how many diets fail, so to speak.
I'm a scientist.
You are a fox doctor.
And a frog doctor.
And a frog doctor. And now you're also a diet doctor. Congratulations.
Oh my God.
So we know that the basal ganglia, specifically the stradium, has an essential role in regulating eating behavior, but it might also function as a post-eating caloric sensor and coordinates an appropriate behavioral response to food exposure and nutrient exposure in the gut. The study did a direct comparison between blood oxygen level dependent signals in the stratum. They said this as if that was like an obvious thing in the study. And I was like, huh.
It makes me feel a lot better because sometimes when I'm reading stuff like this, like I just did for the ADHD weed episode, I'm scrolling back like, what did I miss?
Yeah, they kept shortening it to bold, and I like had to keep going back to remind myself what bold stood for. So then I finally wrote it out because I was like, all right. So we know that dopamine is involved in the motivational and rewarding aspects of food intake. We discussed this in our ADHD and food episode back in last November, right before Thanksgiving. So we know that dopamine is involved in the motivational and rewarding aspects of food intake. But when it comes to obesity, there's a blunted dopamine reaction to nutrients, which has been suggested to contribute to food consumption that is beyond the homeostatic needs of your body, which, again, when we talked about medical bias and obesity, and we talked about ADHD and food, there's a huge correlation they're finding between people who have ADHD and people who also struggle with binge eating disorder,
and the types of foods that they're craving.
Correct. So the researchers wanted to see if that was a good hypothesis, that it's the blunted dopamine reaction that can lead to needing or feeling like you need to eat more than your body needs to maintain. The researchers wanted to see if that was a good hypothesis, if that blunted dopamine reaction actually is causing your brain to crave more food than what you actually need to continue to survive. So they did intragastric infusions of glucose and lipids in both the lean and the obese groups. The glucose caused a dopamine release in all groups with no differences between the lean and obese patients. The lipid infusions, however, caused a dopamine release in lean participants only. Obese participants did not develop a dopamine response to lipid infusions after weight loss either. So they just had no response to it whatsoever. So, which again, like, is why you might feel like, oh, I can eat so much fatty food and it's like never enough. It doesn't bother me. I always want more.
Right.
Yeah. Your brain isn't registering that you're having any.
Cape Cod chips. I could just eat a bottomless bag of them.
I was like giving PK a hard time because he hates Pizza Hut. And I was telling him that I was going to order some for lunch while he was out running errands today. And, but it was the kind, like, I can eat Pizza Hut pizza. It is so greasy and terrible. I can eat that. Oh my God, it's so good.
Ugh, yeah.
So good.
You know where I used to love it? Was at BJ's. They had like that Pizza Hut.
Like to go.
Yeah, the little personal pan ones. Oh my God.
We always got the personal pan pizzas when we were kids. They're so good. I think it was through the Book It thing though that we got the personal pan pizzas. But yeah, like the cheesy breadsticks. Oh my God, I'd run a whole train on them at work. So but anyway, so these results though of this testing led the researchers to conclude that dopamine release in lean people was not nutrient specific, which supports the conclusion that the stratum, I don't know, the basal ganglia thingy is a general calorie sensor that is supposed to tell us when to stop eating and monitor whether we've received enough nutrition to maintain our biologic functions. The defective dopamine response to lipids in the gut, but not to glucose, indicates obese people have impaired lipid sensing and nutrient-specific pathways that are involved in dopamine release. This study also mentioned how most obese people have some form of insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of other studies that I didn't get into about the cause of insulin resistance and what that can do to your body. You touched on it when you were doing your PMDD briefly. Episode. Yeah. So this study didn't really go too far into the glucose thing, but we know that insulin resistance is something that there's medication for. Right. And we know what insulin does for our body as far as like it being a storage hormone and carrying glucose to your cells so that it can be used. But anyway,
that kind of makes sense, like why they are using like diabetic medications for this because of that overlap. And there's just such a high instance of diabetes in the United States. So like on the bright side, at least if they're finding these links, there's already a lot of information and research on insulin resistance and that kind of realm of healthcare.
Right. And I think in fact, what I know, the reason that this study is important and newsworthy and why I heard about it on CNN's homepage, not even like poking around for something to talk about, is because this is explaining why it can be so hard to lose weight and so hard to keep it off. Mm-hmm. And we discussed in our dieting episodes, you get to this point where you're just like, why isn't this working? Like, what the hell? And it's, your gut just isn't communicating with your brain right, or your brain isn't receiving the message properly. Somewhere along the line, there's a breakdown of communication, and without some sort of assistance, you're not going to find a solution to it. So I just thought it was a super interesting discussion, especially because it hinged on dopamine in the brain and how that can impact our weight. And we talk about dopamine all of the time on this
all the time.
podcast.
And we also talk about a lot how part of, having a diagnosis like ADHD is understanding the kind of internal workings that go with it and why it's causing these behaviors, and being nice to yourself because you're like, okay, this is not, it's not that I can't focus because I'm lazy or I'm just, doing X, Y, and Z, or I'm eating too much sugar, like whatever bullshit is out there, people have told you. And breaking it down to being like, okay, I don't have these proper, exchanges of receptors and hormones in my brain, and it's impacting how my brain functions. This is the same thing. So,
yes.
I mean, in a perfect world, they eventually develop like what's basically an SSRI to help improve that TUM brain communication and, give people relief on like such a, like getting to the core of it type of treatment.
Yes. And I think also for purposes of like stigma, the study is hopefully going to go a long way in, at least making it so like, okay, it's not my fault. Like there's only so much I can do. There's something else going on. Like diet and exercise isn't going to change my brain.
Right.
And isn't going to change my biology. So like, it's the kind of thing where there's a huge amount of weight stigma just in our society, which again, we've talked about before, but it's just one of those things where it was just so interesting to me. And, we need dopamine as people with ADHD, we don't have it. And if we can't produce it, or and it takes longer for our brains to produce enough dopamine to tell us to stop eating, we're going to keep eating to stim, for hunger, for emotional regulation, all sorts of things. It's going to continue to happen. And it's not because I'm not listening to my body. It's because my body is silent on that issue.
Or like miscommunicating or misfiring or communicating improperly. Like it's just, I mean, when you think about what I'm dying to know, like eventually when they do the research on it, and I'm glad they're finally doing like real research on this, but like the overlap between like addiction, ADHD, dopamine, and obesity, because I feel like those four things are like constantly like swirling around each other. Like how much is dopamine driving obesity, ADHD, and these addictive qualities that are driving, an opioid epidemic and now a fentanyl crisis and all these different forms of substance abuse and these addictive behaviors, eating being one of them, which is like going to come down to brain science. And it's not like a personal failing. It's that your brain is literally operating differently.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, so next week, what I'm going to do is pick up this discussion and diving into that GLP-1 hormone that I mentioned earlier and everything surrounding that. As I said, you've probably heard of these medications online and in the media, particularly under the name Ozempic. There's also Wegovy, Saxenda, and Mounjaro are the big four right now.
It sounded like completely made up.
Well, they are medication brands, but there's several others that are currently in production because these have been so successful on helping people lose weight. And, Ozempic especially has been in the media in a negative way. A lot of celebrities or celebrity adjacent people are buying up a lot of it. And Ozempic in particular, you're supposed to doctors shouldn't be prescribing it unless you have a type 2 diabetes diagnosis as well. And if you don't have that, then you should be given Wegovy, which is a slightly smaller dose than what Ozempic offers. But celebrities and rich people can do what they want in capitalism. So they're buying up a lot of it. And then there's been criticisms like, oh, they have Ozempic face. And it's like they're comparing people who have had buccal fat
Oh, yeah,
removal
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and with people who have lost weight. And like, yeah, you lose weight, your face is going to thin out. Like it's
Right.
just, you lose weight. You don't get to choose where you lose the weight from.
No, and that's
Um,
usually like the first place you see it too.
well, right, because you know, for the most part, that's you don't really like, yeah, you have muscles in your face, but they're not muscles the way you have muscles on your arms or legs. Like they
Right.
don't exist to like lift things up.
Right.
So like, you know, there's just less there to
Right.
to hide that you've lost weight. So but in any event, you know, Ozempic has gotten a lot of heat. I fully was like, that's some bullshit. You're taking drugs away from people who need them with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, having now done research and learned about them, like I understand Ozempic obviously is still just FDA approved for people with type 2 diabetes, but these other medications, they're GLP-1 hormones and they give you that hormone. So if you're the idea being that it makes you feel full faster. It gives you that same, regardless of what you're eating, whether it's a lipid or glucose or
Mm-hmm.
just water, it will make you feel full faster. So you end up eating less, thereby kind of like bypassing the need for a dopamine calorie inhibitor response, whatever the fuck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about next week is the
Oh,
study
cool.
that came out in 2021 that found that GLP-1s can be used for sustained weight loss, and whether or not that's a good thing.
That's interesting. I'm really looking forward to that because this is like, and it's interesting. And I think that there is a lot of, you know, celebrity or like, you know, people in a public eye struggle with the same things a lot of normal people struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
but lie about how they get there.
Yeah.
So how many of them are, you know, self-conscious of, you know, aging and wrinkles and are getting facelifts, but are like lying about it. And it's like, not that you have to disclose things, but you know, like everybody's entitled to like their privacy. But if you're billing it as like Olivia Munn had that buccal fat transfer, had something done, had like work
Yeah.
done on her chin or her nose or something, and was saying that it was like some kind of Japanese potato that she was eating. Like, no, it's fucking bullshit, man. Like, don't lie to people.
Well, and that's just it, where it's like, you know, especially when you have any kind of platform to pretend like, oh, you know, it's just clean living in Jesus.
Right, it's
Like,
bullshit.
shut the fuck up. Like, just be honest about like what you're doing. And I have to say, I was the most recent season of The Real Housewives of New Jersey just ended. But one of the women on the show, this woman named Margaret, I love her. She's like a villain, apparently. I think she's just hysterical because
Villains are usually the best characters
she
on a show
calls people
anyway.
on their shit and she's like super fucking funny about it. But like, and I also feel like she gets it. Like she understands that like the Housewives is like a joke. Like
Right, right.
but in any event, she's lost like probably like 15 or 20 pounds. Like she didn't have much to lose and she's
Mhm.
postmenopausal, so she had a little bit of extra weight anyway. Which again is like natural. But she
And that's
said,
the hardest. I do feel like that last little bit is it's the hardest, and you just wind up chasing it and chasing it and chasing it.
yes. And you know, she is in the public eye and she's in a franchise and where, yeah, you know, you got to be thin. They don't put chubby women on those shows.
Yep.
So, you know, it on the one hand, you know, I feel badly for these celebrities and, you know, micro celebrities who feel like they have to lose weight in order to stay relevant or to stay,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the show and to continue to make money. But at the very least, this woman, Margaret, she was like, yeah, I'm taking Ozempic. Or she didn't say Ozempic. She was like, I'm taking a GLP-1 medication that's prescribed through my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And like, she was like, yeah, I'm absolutely. And she was like fully upfront. She was like, yeah. She's like, I also, you know, eat right and exercise, but she also doesn't really drink. And she's been very clear all the way through. She was like, I'd rather eat my calories than drink them. I'm not really a big drinker.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, that's just been her thing the whole time. And So, you know, all of these women, like none of them, I don't think you can say that they are heavy eaters. Um,
Yeah, they're
but
all doing the opposite of that
correct.
because it makes
And
better TV.
but you know, it's I just give her a lot of credit for being like, yeah, I've absolutely lost weight and I absolutely did it with medication prescribed by my doctor. Like totally.
And
And
removing the shame factor from that.
right. And she was very, yeah. And I think she was very like confident in how she kind of announced that. And I just, you know, for whatever people think of her on the show, I think that, you know, I have to give her a lot of credit for like owning it and saying, yeah, this is how I'm doing this and it's working for me. And like people have said, like, you know, this is like a good weight for you. You look good. Like
Mm-hmm.
you look, you know, you don't look emaciated, you don't look whatever. And you know, it's just this kind of thing where yeah, just, you know, it's the sort of thing. And I, you know, again, when you have a platform, especially with young people looking at you have to be honest about what you're doing. And you can't
Oh,
just, you know,
the dynamic that has played in so many like tragic stories
yeah.
where, you know, the media decides, okay, what's cool right now is this heroin chic and looking like, you know, you're about 20 pounds underweight and being able to see most of your skeleton when you're moving.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of where we're headed right now, I think,
Mm-hmm.
which is why all these celebrities are desperately trying to lose this additional 20 pounds.
Yep.
But at the very least, you know, being honest and not saying, you know, oh, Kim Kardashian, you know, all I did was wear a contractor trash bag for pants and a shirt and then went running for 2 hours on my treadmill at home. And I only ate liquid greens and then I went to the Met Gala and, you know, Marilyn Monroe's dress. And like, that's a totally normal thing to do. Um, like when you could have just had a fucking replica made that fit you, you know, you're doing all these things and then you're wearing, you know, waist trainers and uh getting, you know, Brazilian butt lifts and you're doing all this stuff and you act like, no, this is like fucking Khloe Kardashian. Like she had a
And
fucking head
telling people,
transplant. Like,
yeah. And you know, and then making it where being a healthy weight, let alone overweight, is shameful.
correct. Yeah.
Because like I was at the point prior to getting pregnant where I was at like, okay, this is comfortable for me. This is sustainable for me. I can still be eating the things that I like to eat. I'm still getting exercise. Like this is a healthy balance for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not putting a ton of effort in. I'm just like chugging along and I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
And you still go to the doctor and people are like,
Not
you
even going to the doctor. You go to the fucking store and you try to find a pair of pants and they're all cut different because you're shopping in a different season in a
Yep.
different store. And it's like, okay, well, I was a 12 in this store, but now I guess I'm got to go over the plus size in this other store. And so you feel like
Yeah.
shit about yourself
I remember
because,
I actually had put something on social media at one point where I had bought a pair of like a size 6 one place, a size 8 another place, a 10 another place. And like the 10 I couldn't button, the 8 fit perfectly, and the 6 I could button, but like it didn't really fit.
mm,
And then there's other times I'd be in a 12. And
mm-hmm,
like in reality, I was probably a 10,
right,
solidly a 10. Like I was wearing a size medium, like
right. Yeah.
no average.
Yes. And it's just
Certain
impossible. So you,
stores, I couldn't find stuff.
and even with, you know, like you're maintaining your weight, you're
Hmm.
exercising, you're doing all these things that you're supposed to be doing. And you weren't overweight. Like you didn't, there was nothing about you, like looking at you before pregnant where I was like, oh, she's getting there. Like, no,
Yeah.
there was nothing where I was like, oh, okay. Not that I really spent a lot of time looking at your body, but
No,
like,
but there was a mental component of this is healthy. I'm not obsessing over it. I'm not weighing myself all the time. Like I've achieved this is a good balance for me
mm-hmm,
personally. Like mentally, I don't think I'm supposed to be 130 pounds.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Even though
same.
based on my height, I'm probably supposed to be between 115 and 130. I would look bad. I would look really underweight at those weights. So I think
Yeah.
it's just, you know, the BMI charts are skewed. I also
Yes.
had like a higher muscle mass, which meant I was never going to fall where I was supposed to in the BMI.
Also, I just saw something where the American Medical Association has published guidance telling physicians to get away from using the BMI for
well,
as a
that's fucking a
diagnostic tool.
news flash for anybody else because everybody uses it.
I mean, I guess the announcement like also acknowledged the racist backdrop to the formulation of the BMI. But basically, yeah, it was saying like, you know, don't be using that as your diagnostic criteria for as the only reason that somebody is unhealthy, basically. And
even when I got pregnant, they were like, oh, so based on this, your BMI was, you know, whatever. So you can only gain 20 pounds. LOL, by the way.
I mean, my BMI right now is 50 and 55, something like that. And I have excellent cholesterol. My blood pressure is steady, fine. It went up a little bit when I started taking ADHD meds, but otherwise it's nothing. I mean, my fasting glucose is steady and healthy. You know, there's nothing I don't have, you know, headaches or a racing heart. I have nothing. There's no indication that I'm unhealthy other than my weight.
Right. Right. So if you took that factor out and you're looking at a chart, my cholesterol is always high. My blood pressure is always high, and I'm on blood pressure medication. My chart is physicked. So like it's arbitrary. Like it's just, you know, one thing does not mean another.
That's just it. And you know, that's why it's you have to look at the whole person, which I think is why this study is so impressive.
Yes.
Because it's saying like you can't just look at the size of them because they all lost, you know, 10% of their weight. They were all on this diet for 12 weeks and they still didn't have the brain reaction. So it doesn't come back. It's not just because, oh, you're overweight, that part of your brain turns off permanently.
Yeah. Oh, you're fixed.
Right. Like just lose weight and then you'll be normal again. And it's just, so anyway. So yeah, we'll delve more into this topic next week. So definitely tune in because there's more to talk about when it comes to the permanent changes in your brain when you're overweight and you try to lose weight and all that stuff. So
it's fascinating. I'm just like really, all of that information is like that little emoji of the mind blown.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so in the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bar is Ankle High. We're also on Threads for the same handle. You can check out our merch at bit.ly/ankle high merch. We are on Patreon at patreon.com/the bar is ankle high. And while Garrett is on maternity leave, we are opening up our ad-free episodes to all Anklet and Limbo Champion subscribers. So if you want to support us and get your ad-free episodes, then now's the time to do it. And leave us a 5-star review wherever you can find us because we're cute and funny. And this is interesting, obviously.
Yeah.
And until then,
we're really good at this.
Until then, you know, be nice to yourself and
stay mad.
Yeah, stay mad because the bar is ankle high.
Bye.
Bye.